Welcome to Oneiro.tv, the channel that's dedicated to bringing you the best information on lucid dreaming and the out-of-body experience. Today we're very fortunate to have with us world-renowned expert on lucid dreaming, Mr. Robert Waggoner. Robert is the author of Lucid Dreaming, Gateway to the Inner Self, a groundbreaking book that goes very deep on the subject, following Robert on his journey to the true core of what we call reality. Robert, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Aidan.
You started your journey over 30 years ago. There was very little information around back then on lucid dreaming. Tell us a little bit about how you discovered it.
Yeah, so this was back in 1975, if you can believe this. I was in high school. I was reading a book, Journey to Ixtlan by Carlos Castaneda. And so it was a really fascinating book because Carlos Castaneda was a UCLA graduate student investigating psychoactive plants like peyote and all. And he found a shaman, Don Juan, who took him under his wing and began to teach him. And one thing he asked him to do in this book was to become consciously aware in dreaming. And I thought, boy, I've never tried that before. So I thought I'd give that a try and had some success.
Great. So tell us a bit about how you developed your skills within lucid dreaming and inducing it.
Yeah, so you have to realize that back in 1975, lucid dreaming hadn't been scientifically validated and proven as it has now. So back then, all I had to go on were these books by Castaneda. And so in this book, his shamanic teacher asked him to become consciously aware by finding his hands in the dream state. And so that's what I did, Hayden. Every night before I go to sleep, I just look at my hands while telling myself, tonight in my dreams I'll see my hands and realize I'm dreaming. Tonight in my dreams I'll see my hands and realize I'm dreaming. And I'd do that over and over until I got sleepy and see if I dreamt about it.
Yeah.
3 nights into doing it, my hands just popped right in front of my face, and I said, oh my God, my hands, this is a dream. And it was the most incredible thing to realize that these guys over here who looked like football players, they were dream figures. And this wall over here that just felt totally real was dream stuff. It was a projection of my mind. And so after that first lucid dream, I was totally hooked because it was the most incredible thing. And each night I just did that practice until finally Stephen LaBerge and other people came out with different practices to try.
Wow, okay. And how would you say having been a lucid dreamer has sort of positively impacted your life?
Yeah. You know, lucid dreaming is really an incredible journey. As you go deeper and deeper into it, you learn more and more about yourself. You learn more and more about the nature of reality, the nature of dreaming, and all of that. So at the beginning, it was just totally fun. You know, I'd become lucidly aware and I'd go flying around. I'd become lucidly aware. I'd ask a dream figure to interpret a dream symbol. Like one time I became lucidly aware while looking at my friends who were standing on this porch, and I saw these gems on the stairway, and I picked up a gem and I pointed at my friend Andrea, and I said, hey Andrea, what does this represent? And all of a sudden my friend told me it represents hope and consciousness. And I woke up thinking, wow, maybe that is what it represented in that dream, but maybe there's something more going on here. Was that just my subconscious, or is there something more? And so after a while I started doing experiments and going deeper and seeing that lucid dreaming has profound depth.
So you could interpret the dreams while you were within them.
Yeah, I thought this was a great advance on Freud and Jung, that you could actually have the dream figures interpret the rest of the dream for you. And in some of my lucid dreams I've done just exactly that. I've just turned to the dream figures, especially if you can find ones that seem very knowledgeable, and just say, hey, tell me what this is all about. And sometimes it's amazing to hear their view of what the scene is all about.
Yeah. One thing I was going to say to you about is memory. A lot of people will claim that they don't even remember their dreams at all.
Right.
What do you think it is that causes this sort of dream amnesia?
Yeah. So I normally tell people there's 2 reasons if you don't remember your dreams. The first one is probably you've just decided not to care about dreaming. You kind of devalue it, don't understand it, don't see why it's important, and so you've just kind of ruled it out of your mind. But the second reason is that occasionally some people will have some trauma in their life. Something bad might have happened, they'll start having nightmares, and then they'll tell themselves, don't remember dreams, and they shut it down. I remember once I was giving a talk in Colorado, a young guy raised his hand and told me he hadn't remembered a dream in 10 years. And so I asked him, okay, what happened 10 years ago? And he thought for a moment, and he realized that his parents had had a horrible divorce. And so I told him, look, you may have decided consciously or subconsciously not to remember your dreams. That night, I encouraged him to tell his inner self, hey, I'm ready to remember my dreams. And he said what happened, he went to sleep, and all of a sudden, it was like slideshow, image after image, like 10 years of dream images had been stored up. And he was so happy the next morning he saw me that he was able to reconnect with his dreaming.
So you feel that anyone given the extra push, extra effort, they can certainly increase the dream recall.
Exactly. And so that's why I encourage people, keep a dream journal by your bed, have a pen there, be ready. And so in the middle of the night, if you wake up, you'll probably remember a dream if that's the first thing on your mind, and just jot down a few notes so you can recall the entire dream in the morning. But for some people, I have to encourage them too, you've got to turn off your cell phone. The first thing in your mind can't be, oh, who's been texting me, who's been calling me, and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Your studies really sort of push the boundaries in lucid dreaming and the study of the experience. What do you think was it that sort of gave you the instinct to keep delving deeper with your studies?
Right. So what happened is back in 1985, I joined this group, and for 3 years we had monthly goals to achieve, and then you try to achieve that goal in a lucid dream and send in your dream to the group, and they'd photocopy it and send it all around. And so at that time what happened, we were supposed to discover what a dream figure represented. And so I became lucidly aware. I followed a woman into an office. I looked around the office. There were 3 women and this gentleman dressed in a 3-piece suit and looking very distinguished. And so I went up to him and I just looked at him and said, excuse me, what do you represent? And the strange thing, Hayden, a voice boomed out a response from above him. And I didn't understand the response, and so I said, basically, please explain that. And then the voice boomed out again, a more comprehensive response that now made sense. So that's when everything changed for me. Because at that moment I realized there might be something behind the dream. There might be something behind the curtain, behind the screen, however you want to think about it. And so I began to experiment on my own. I'd become lucidly aware, and I would just shout out questions to what I call the awareness behind the dream. And when it responded, and when the lucid dream would suddenly dramatically change, I knew I had tapped into my larger awareness in a sense. And I knew that there was much more to lucid dreaming then.
What sort of adventures transpired following that discovery then? That sounds really
It really was amazing. And so for someone like watching this, a simple thing to do is become lucidly aware, ignore all the dream figures, the dream setting, and just shout out to the dream, hey dream, show me something important for me to see. Show me something important for me to see. And I'll tell you what will happen. Probably at that moment, the entire lucid dream will change, and you'll see a whole new vista, a whole new setting, and you'll see one of the most important things for you to see at that moment. And that's when you realize that you're tapping into your larger self-awareness. As for me, I took it a little bit further, and I would shout out to experience concepts. Like, hey, I want to understand this concept. Or, hey, let me feel unconditional love. Or, hey, what's it like to feel divine grace? You can shout out those things and totally have your mind pretty much blown, especially in the early years if you give that a try. But really, just ask, show me something important for me to see.
Sounds great. The thing I personally like about your writing style is that you don't tend to take things for granted. So even if you've experienced them lucidly yourself, you'll still take the other points of view into consideration of the same experience. So you don't just say that's it, that's what I've had and that's what it is. How do you think you managed to sort of, or you built in that habit of second guessing all of the the experiences you had?
At the very beginning, so I started in 75 before it had even been scientifically validated, like it was in the late 70s and 80s with the work of Keith Hearn here in England and the work of Stephen LaBerge in the US. And So because I was the only person I knew who was doing this, I had to work out the rules. How does the dream world work? You know, if you stare at something too long, will the dream collapse? And if you get too emotional, will the dream collapse? How emotional can you get before the dream collapses? And so I began to realize that it was a principled state, that there's actually rules in the dream universe, and you got to learn what they are and how to follow them. And so as I kept going deeper and finally began to meet some lucid dreamers once it became validated in 1980, then just like any early pioneer, you want to exchange stories and observations, see if other people are getting the same. Because at the time you wonder, is my dream state just unique to me? The symbols might be, but what about the rest of it? And as I talked to other people, I realized that these same principles, don't get too emotional in a lucid dream, don't stare at something too long in a lucid dream, this is how you respond if you go into the void or the gray state. And when I found out that they were discovering the same things, it made it seem like an alternate dimension, like a new universe. And that you could be consciously aware in there was just extraordinary.
Wow. You've written also about the expectation effect within your book.
Right.
Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so all of us lucid dreamers learn quite quick on that your own mental thinking influences the dream. And one thing that's very powerful is expectation. So the expectation effect is basically you get what you expect to the degree that you expect it at that moment. And for me, the classic example, I became lucidly aware. I decided I was going to fly out of this building and go explore. And so I flew right through the wall easily because I knew it was just dream stuff. So I flew around this kind of college campus area and had a lot of fun. Then I decided to go back to the very beginning spot of the lucid dream. And as I was flying from the other side of the wall, well, now that wall looked a little bit more concrete, a little bit, kind of thicker and denser and something. And right as I got up to it, I had a moment's expectation that this might be a little bit more difficult. And at that moment, I got stuck halfway in the wall. So you can imagine you're stuck halfway in. And at that moment, I thought, oh, what the blank, this is a dream wall. And then I pushed myself through. But you've seen other people who become lucidly aware. They fly up to a wall, and they're not sure if they're going to get through. They really don't know what to expect, and boom, they bounce off. Even though it's dream stuff, and 30 seconds later, they fly through.
It's kind of habitual, physical stuff almost within the dream state.
Right. So the power of expectation is very important in the lucid dream. But that's why in my book I also point out that unexpected things happen. And they happen quite a bit, because I want people to realize that the expectation effect is kind of a general rule, but it's not the final word.
That's what I was going to ask you next, actually, was why do you think sometimes you get what you don't expect in the dream?
Yeah, because like in the instance when I asked the gentleman, excuse me, please tell me what you represent, and a voice boomed out an answer from above, is that I think actually in the dream state, in the lucid dream state, we're actually being educated. I call these lessons in lucid dreaming. Virtually every lucid dream has a lesson if you'll pay attention to it. And in these moments when the unexpected happen, it makes you kind of enlarge your viewpoint or think what's going on here. I have my book has a website where people can submit questions. And there's a great one that came in a few months ago from a young guy named Brandon. And he wrote me, he goes, hey Robert, every time I become lucidly aware and I begin to do things that are inappropriate or wrong, all of a sudden my mom appears looking very disapproving. And I run up to her and I say, Mom, go away, this is my lucid dream. But she just sits there looking disapproving. What do you think is happening? And I told the young man, I go, look, obviously, when you're doing something inappropriate or wrong, there's this subconscious response. And in this particular case, it looks like the image of your mom is appearing to kind of show that feeling that you have of guilt or whatever. So I don't think it's your mom, but I think it's a representation. And so in that lucid dream is a lesson that just because your mind is active doesn't mean that your larger awareness is not active. It is active. You can call it the subconscious if you want, but there's more going on in the lucid dream than just you and your thinking. You're actually in touch with a larger awareness.
Following on from the expectation, you've written about intent and the power of intent.
Right.
With that, it sort of raised more questions in that you started to question what was providing the detail of the intent. So you might have expected, you've gone outside of a room, you've gone back in, something's happened, but it's the detail you haven't asked for.
Right.
So it raised quite a lot of questions with that, didn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So here's the issue with intent. There's actually two types of intent. There's what I call limited intent. So here's an example of limited intent. You become lucidly aware. You see a garage over there, and you tell yourself, when I open the garage door, there's going to be a red Ferrari. And you go over, open the garage door, there's a red Ferrari. You hop in, there's the key, you go driving around the dream landscape and have a great lucid dream adventure. But that's the limited intent, in that you intend the red Ferrari to be, and then you discover it. Unlimited intent is when you ask, show me something important for me to see. You don't know what's going to happen. And that's the time when you get your mind blown. That's when you discover that there's more going on here than just your expectation and mental models being created.
Something's creating that, isn't it?
Yeah, there's something incredible going on. I think another time it occurred to me is I became lucidly aware when I was in a grade school classroom. And I thought, wait a second, I've graduated from college. I'm not in school any longer. And I became lucid at that moment. I stood up in class, and I was kind of, at that time I was probably 23 or 24, and I just shouted out to the class, hey, I'm going to step out into the hallway, but when I return, I want more attractive women in here. And so I walked out to the hallway, and I sat there for a moment, and I thought, well, gosh, how long do I have to wait here for the attractive women to appear? And after about 15 seconds, I got bored, and I opened up the door, and now here was a whole room of very attractive women who had, for some reason, all gotten into a nice U-shaped line, and none of them had any clothes on, even though I hadn't requested that specifically. But what it made me realize was how creative that was. I just asked, hey, I want to see more attractive women in here, and now here's a group of 20, 30 very attractive women of all different shapes and sizes, and I just thought, where does that creativity come from? How does that manifest? And that's when I really started to see that there's something greater going on here, that the larger awareness is extraordinarily creative.
And how did that affect your approach to dream manipulation from there on in?
Yeah. So I realized that the power of intent is something that everyone should play around with. So you can play around with the limited intent. Hey, I want to see a red Ferrari. Hey, I want to see more attractive women. Hey, I want to see more attractive men. Whatever it is. But this sense of unlimited intent, when you shout out that you want to experience a concept. Like one time I suggested, I wonder what energy is. What is energy? And at that moment, far away, I saw like these two white tornadoes. They were brilliantly white, and they were coming my way. And I thought, oh my God, what did I just call up? And what was interesting, as these tornadoes of light came closer, I saw that they were composed of three separate elements spinning around each other. And when they got up to me, I just was having so much fun at that point. I just let myself get caught up in these representations of energy, of chi. But in those moments, you realize that you're tapping into a larger sense of awareness, and you could actually begin to experiment with it. Could you get unknown information in a lucid dream that you could later validate? Could you get precognitive information in a lucid dream that you could later validate? Could you work on an engineering problem in a lucid dream and later validate it in waking life? And as people can read in my book, I think the answer to all those questions is yes.
Have you any examples of precognitive dreams that you've had?
Well, so here's an example of a telepathic type lucid dream. There was a young man, Ian Coslow. He was a university student. He had been getting my magazine, the Lucid Dreaming Experience, and he asked me if I really thought it was true that you could get precognitive and unknown information. And I wrote him back and I told him, look, you're such a good lucid dreamer, you try it yourself. Because if I talk about it, you'll just wonder. If you do it yourself, then you'll know. And so the first time he became lucid, he and a young woman in the dormitory had agreed that when he'd become lucid, he should try to find her and find the weird freckle on her back. And so he became lucidly aware that week. He started to walk down to her dorm room, and he said it was weird that all these people came out of their dorm rooms and started yelling at him that this isn't a dream, this is real, and they hassled him so much that he finally woke up. So he realized that those were kind of his inner symbols of distractions, of doubts. And so the next time he became lucid, he thought, I'm not going out into the hallway, I'll just call her to me. So he said, all of a sudden there was a knock on the door. It was a young woman. She came in and she turned around and there was the weird freckle on her back. But he said the strange thing was it was right above her rump, right above her rear. And he was so surprised because he felt like she had hinted that it was along her side. But still, that's what he saw. So he woke up from the lucid dream. An hour later, he went down to her room, knocked on the door. She said, I'll put on a t-shirt and you put your finger on the t-shirt where you think the weird freckle is, and I'll pull it up and we'll see. He said, she turned around, he put his finger right above her rump, she pulled up the t-shirt, and his finger was touching the freckle. So that shows you that somehow, on some level, he got information that was outside of his own knowing, and later he's able to validate it himself. And so you can do this with other experiments of any type, and there's a lot more examples that I could give you.
Excellent. Just stepping back a second to what you said about experiencing concepts. You had a really interesting experience one time with your feeling tone dream. Right. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so at this time in my lucid dreaming life, I'd realized that there was an awareness behind the dream, and I was kind of trying to probe how deep and broad its knowing was. And so I've been reading a book by Jane Roberts called The Seth Speaks. And in this book, she brings up this idea that all of us have a feeling tone. And the feeling tone is the essence of ourselves in this physical reality. And as I read about it, I thought, well, gosh, is it more feeling or more tone? What is it exactly? And so I became lucidly aware. I remembered, oh yeah, I wanted to find out about this. So I just ignored everything and I shouted out, hey, I want to hear my feeling tone. And it was amazing. At that moment, a little black dot high above me appeared, like 30 meters above me. And from this little black dot came this piercing ah sound, this real high-pitched ah. And that really shocked me. And then as I watched, it developed a cone that started vibrating with this ah sound even louder. And the cone kept growing and growing and growing until it grew all the way down to me and vibrated me basically out of existence. And so at that moment, it was like my awareness ceased to exist, but it took up residence in another awareness that was watching this vibrating cone, which then had to remember who I was. And so it was going through its larger mind, trying to remember who I was, until it brought me back into existence. And then at that moment, I found myself lucidly aware, looking at the house I was sleeping in. I'm sitting in a full lotus position. My fingers are in a mudra, glowing gold. And I thought, what just happened to me? And then I remembered, oh yeah, that ah sound. I said, whoa, not doing that. But when I woke up from that, I learned a few years later that the Hindu belief in mantras, that mantras are these sound syllables, these seed syllables, and from them come all the sound energy that vibrates the world into existence, was basically what I'd experienced, was basically a total representation of the concept of sound energy from mantra. And it was a total mind-blowing concept experience.
Wow. You also took the very brave step of actively seeking out evil within the universe to conquer fear. Yeah. How did that work out for you? 'Cause that's something most people have run a mile from.
Yeah, exactly. So as I kept going deeper and deeper in lucid dreaming, you kind of wonder, it's getting deeper, and you begin to wonder, is anything out there that's going to bite you in the rear when you're not waiting for it or watching. And so I began to wonder if evil existed inherently. Now, No, I say inherently to mean that I know that people can be nasty to each other and animals and the planet and all that. I understand all that. I'm saying, but is it inherent in the very beginning of the universe? So I became lucidly aware, and I decided to seek out evil. And I kept flying and flying and flying through the universe, past star systems, the whole thing. I got to the very edge of the universe, and then a voice behind me, as I'm looking out into this incredible darkness, the voice behind me goes, the light upholds the darkness. I thought, oh, that's kind of interesting. So the light and the darkness have a relationship. They're just not antagonists to each other. They actually have a relationship. So the light upholds the darkness. And then it said, everything is conscious and alive. And then the voice said, even the space between your fingers is conscious and alive. And when I heard that last thing, I realized that we basically exist in a large awareness. That there's this larger awareness that we're all a part of, that even though darkness or negativity or evil seems to appear, that actually it's part of the educational relationship of light and darkness, and that it appears just because of that educational system. And so when I woke up from that lucid dream, I realized that I can go further, that there's not going to be something that's going to get me or come out of the blue and wipe me out. And from then on, I was really relatively fearless in my investigations of the lucid dream world.
So you say that helped you going forward with your
right.
other investigations?
Right. And you know what's interesting about this is, as I talk to more and more experienced lucid dreamers, they tell me that as they went further, they began to hear in the lucid dream what I started to hear, which was a voice that would say, trust, nothing to fear. And sometimes in my lucid dreams, I'll see banners hanging in the sky, trust, nothing to fear. And other people are having the same kind of experience where they're being told to carry on and to not be afraid.
The differences, this is something else I wanted to discuss, was the differences between out-of-body experience and lucid dreams. That's often discussed.
Right.
How do you define the differences between the two experiences?
Right. So a lucid dream, of course, is when you realize within a dream that you're dreaming. You might see your deceased grandmother and go, wait a second, she's been dead for 5 years now, and realize, oh, this must be a dream. Or you might see a cab flying through the air and think, wait a second, cabs don't fly. This must be a dream. An out-of-body experience that most of us have is more likely to be announced in this way. We're falling asleep. All of a sudden we start to hear maybe humming and vibrating around our head. Sounds like a didgeridoo or motorcycle engine or something. There's all this energy that we start to feel. And at that moment, we realize that something strange is happening. Okay, we're not dreaming, but we're hearing and feeling all these strange sensations. And then what happened to me when I was a teenager is I started to realize I was observing the room from about 3 or 4 feet above my bed. And I was thinking, this is weird. How can I be seeing my room from near the ceiling when I know I'm in bed? And so that's how I realized that lucid dreams and out-of-bodies were fundamentally different. Lucid dream occurs when you realize within a dream you're dreaming. Out-of-bodies occur at that fuzzy state between waking and sleeping, and has all these extra features, the vibrating, the humming, the energy. Sometimes you'll see kind of these ghostly arms and all. Sometimes you'll roll out of your body or you'll slam back into your body. And these are all things that most lucid dreamers never report about a lucid dream. There's some other phenomenological differences, like in a lucid dream, if it's super long, it's easy to remember the last 4 or 5 minutes, but the very beginning is hard to remember. In an out-of-body, you'll remember basically every detail, even if it goes on for 30 or 40 minutes. You just have an incredibly crystal clear memory. Also, Robert Monroe, who wrote the books Journey Out of the Body and was really an expert on out-of-body experiences, he said what he thought the difference was. Basically, in an out-of-body experience, you treat the experienced reality as an objective experienced reality. I mean, you respect it as objective. But in a lucid dream, you know it's kind of mind stuff, it's dream stuff. And so if you don't like this wall, you fly through it. Or if you don't like that building over there, you turn it into a castle. And so lucid dreamers relate to the environment, the landscape, much differently than out-of-body experiencers do. But on another level, you could say they're both projections of consciousness. And you actually can move from the lucid dream state into the out-of-body state if you know how to do it. Or you can move from the OBE or sleep paralysis state into the lucid dream state if you know how to do it. And so they're connected, but they're different forms of projections of consciousness.
So perhaps different levels of the same type of experience.
Yeah, they're kind of like different branches on the same tree. You know, they're very similar, and I grant that, but they're unique and distinct in their own way.
Do you think that the out-of-body experience is perhaps defined by the fact that you go through with waking consciousness rather than lose consciousness and then connect on the other side? So perhaps you have a stronger sense of self when you get in there, and
right.
That's perhaps why you've got a longer
right.
Memory train and stuff like that.
Right. It's a little bit different because think of it. A lot of out-of-body experiences are reported when people have trauma. They're in a car accident. Boom, I was out of my body. I saw my physical body laying there bleeding. Or somebody has a heart attack or some sort of shock. And so in those situations, they weren't even dreaming. They weren't even intending to go OBE. They weren't even planning to sleep. They just separated. And so the OBE, just as you're mentioning, is kind of a movement of your consciousness. Sometimes it's dramatic, and sometimes it's thought out, and sometimes it's spontaneous. But you are kind of moving that waking consciousness and taking it with you.
There's always, leading on from that, there's much debate in the lucid dreaming community in regards to the levels of reality within the dream state. What are your thoughts on whether there are consensus or shared environments that exist, whether we, the dreamer, are there or not?
Yeah, boy, that's a great question. So in my book, I have an entire chapter on what I call mutual lucid dreams. And some of us lucid dreamers even did experiments where we tried to become lucidly aware, be sure the other person was lucidly aware, pass on a secret word from a list of 100 words, and pass on a secret gesture. And then when we'd all wake up, we'd write down all our dreams and send it to a fair witness. We wouldn't send them to each other. We'd send it to another witness who would collect them all, and then the next day we'd share them. And in those experiences, sometimes one of the people would become lucid and pick up the secret gesture. Sometimes two of us would become lucid and report very similar environments. And so it would begin to show that possibly, with the right intent, you might be able to meet in what you could call a shared dream realm. But here's what's much more likely to happen. I became lucidly aware once, and I entered a restaurant, and I was sitting in the restaurant admiring all the detail, and all of a sudden my friend Maureen, came in through the door. And I knew I was lucid, and I ran up to her and I go, "Mo, this is a dream, we're dreaming this." And here's what my friend looked like. Her eyes were it's like she had rapid eye movement, and her head was kind of shifting around like she was kind of drunk or something. And I'm thinking, oh, she doesn't get it. She doesn't realize we're dreaming. So I thought, I'll prove it to her. So I grabbed her around the waist. We started floating. We're levitating now. And I said, "Simo, we're levitating. We're floating. This is a lucid dream." But still she had that look, like her eyes were moving around and her head was couldn't stay straight. And I knew she wasn't focused in my dream bubble, my dream realm. And so at that moment I got kind of frustrated that I couldn't prove it to her. So I put my fingers in a peace sign, and I pointed to the peace sign. I shoved it right in her face. And I said, "Mo, do you see that? You can use this as a symbol to help you become lucidly aware anytime you want." And I woke up. So the next morning, I thought Mo might send me an email or call me up. She lives out in California, and I live in the middle of the U.S., but nothing. So 3 months later, I'm out in California on a business trip. I say I have some free time for lunch. I call up Mo. I say, "Hey, you want to get together for lunch?" So imagine this. I'm standing in waking reality outside a restaurant in Burlingame, California. Here comes my friend Mo. She comes walking right up to me, and before she says anything, she puts her fingers in a peace sign and shoves it in my face. And I looked at her and I said, Mo, why are you doing that? And she responded, I don't know, I just felt like it. So that kind of goes back to this whole issue that was raised by Inception. You know, Christopher Nolan came out with this movie Inception because he himself was a lucid dreamer, and he wondered, in a lucid dream, could you implant an idea into another dreamer's mind? And in this example with Mo and I think you see that on a subconscious level sometimes, yes indeed, you can plant an idea into someone else's mind. But the telling factor here was the dream figure. It looked exactly like her, but it looked like she was dreaming because she had rapid eye movement and her head couldn't focus in my dream space. So in those cases, in those rare cases, I think that someone has stumbled into my dream bubble.
That's really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you think that actions that you carry out within the dream space can affect our waking reality as well?
Right. You know, this is a very deep and important part of my book because I talk about the idea of emotional healing in a lucid dream, physical healing in a lucid dream, and also lucid dream actions that affect not only you but also the larger waking reality. And so the short answer is yes, I definitely believe that's the case. But as I go around the world now, and I'm giving talks in the U.S. and here in the U.K. and South America and all, I'm really trying to get people to think about this idea of healing, like emotional healing. Because currently lucid dreaming is used by some in the therapeutic community to assist with post-traumatic stress disorder and the recurring nightmares that often result. And so people come back from Iraq or Afghanistan, every night they have this recurring nightmare about something horrible, and it's a real psychological burden for them. So the therapists teach them, if you can become lucidly aware and either change one thing or confront whatever's chasing you, then the chances are you'll stop having those nightmares.
Kind of cleanse your mind.
Yeah, it'll kind of rectify or resolve things, and you'll kind of realize that your conscious awareness can stop the recurring nightmares.
So it's got huge potential in that area.
So it really does have huge potential in that area, but the greater potential is, I'm getting emails and notes from people now. They're using lucid dreams to take care of phobias. Like a woman has a fear of flying. She writes me, do you think you can take care of fear of flying in a lucid dream? And so I encouraged her, next time you become lucid, and for the next 4 or 5 times, just hop on a lucid dream airplane and go flying. See what it feels like. The worst thing that could happen is, you'll wake up. And so this woman did it, and after about 5 lucid dreams of flying in a lucid dream airplane, she felt so comfortable with flying that she booked a ticket, and she booked a window seat because she wanted to see if it looked like what it looked like on the lucid dream airplane as you took off and flew around. And she flew to a dream conference and had no problems at all. So I'm starting to see more and more people who are overcoming fears or overcoming anxiety, overcoming these kind of emotional disorders by using the power of lucid dreaming to kind of adjust their mind so it no longer bothers them in the waking world.
Okay. I mean, there's also been a lot of stuff written about physical healing in lucid dreams and that sort of thing. Have you ever come across anything like that?
Yeah. In my book, there's an entire chapter with about a dozen successful examples of people who have healed themselves in the lucid dream state. By all appearances, they became lucidly aware. They directed healing energy on the problem area, and oftentimes they'd wake up totally healed. I also give some examples of people who didn't have success, and I show how normally those people, they'd become lucidly aware and they'd go find the dream doctor. And the dream doctor would say, well, gosh, it's Friday, it's 5 p.m., you always come when we're ready to close. And you could see how the person in that lucid dream wasn't having any positive result, because instead of acting on themselves, they sought the result externally, from an
internal, external.
Yeah, exactly. But the way you can do it, if you become lucidly aware and remember that you have an ailment that needs fixing, what some people have done, they've created a ball of healing light, And then, like, let's say you have a bad knee. They'd put the light over your knee in the lucid dream, intending for it to be healed. And oftentimes when they'd wake up, they'd feel 70, 80, 90% better. Just this past week, talking to a woman here in London, she had tinnitus or ringing in the ear. In lucid dreams, she projected healing energy onto her ears. And she said when she woke up, the problem was gone, and was gone for quite a long while. So I do believe that physical healing in the lucid dream state occurs, and it's something that science could study. You could easily get 40 people together, teach 20 of them lucid dreaming and healing techniques, and let the other 20 just be, and come back a year later and see who had the most progress.
That would be interesting, wouldn't it? Yeah. Going on to a more spiritual level, you've written about your experiences with what's known as the clear light.
Yeah,
Can you tell us a bit about the experiences you had there?
Yeah, I think at its very deepest, and as you go deeper and deeper in lucid dreaming, you realize that the spiritual aspect is really the deepest expression of lucid dreaming. In fact, the Tibetan Buddhists talk about lucid dreaming by virtue of what they call dream yoga. And dream yoga is an entire set of practices, one of which is becoming lucidly aware. But the dream yoga, as Naropa, this Indian Buddhist yogi in the 11th century said, he said that dream yoga was one of the 6 paths to enlightenment. I mean, that's how deeply they saw this path of becoming consciously aware in the waking state and in the dream state, and how you could use that to attain full realization. But what happened to me is about 20 years into lucid dreaming, I began to think of all experienced reality as a kind of dream. And when I say that, I mean not a dream as an illusion, but as a mentally created reality. So waking experience, dreaming experience, lucid dreaming experiences, hallucinations, whatever, all experienced reality was a co-created creation of my waking mind and my larger awareness. So that's where the point I got to. But then I started to wonder, what's the nature of source awareness? What's beyond lucid dreaming? And I realized, okay, I know my expectations, my belief, my intent, my focus, my will, it's all hooked into this creating of this lucid dream, but what if I could drop all of that and go beyond lucid dreaming? And when I started to have these thoughts, something strange happened. At night I'd go to sleep, and the entire night it'd be nothing but blue light. And I remember the first time it happened, I woke up trying to remember my dreams, and all I could remember was blue light. So there's no me, there was no action, there was no symbols, it was just blue light the entire night. And I looked at my dream journal and thought, well gosh, what did I put in my dream journal? Blue light? That's not very interesting. And so periodically over the next few weeks, this kept occurring, that I'd have these blue light the entire night. And I remember one morning I went down to my breakfast table, and my wife asked me, she asked me, she said, "Robert, what's happening to you?" And I said, "What do you mean?" She told me that she'd woken up in the middle of the night. She looked at me and she said that I looked like I was in an utter state of bliss. She said she'd never seen anybody look so blissful. And it was one of those blue light nights, and I told her, I'm trying to understand the actual nature of reality, and I'm starting to have some weird experiences. And thankfully, she was nice enough to accept that. But it kept going deeper and deeper until I had what I believe to be a non-dual experience of clear light. And basically by that I mean that think of awareness being aware within awareness. There's no I or you, there's no subject object, it's just awareness within awareness. And when I came out of that experience, I really felt fundamentally changed, like something different had happened. And I didn't even know how to talk about it. It wasn't until I heard a Buddhist monk, Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche, speak about his new book, The Tibetan Yogas of Dream and Sleep, in which he said the ultimate goal of dream yoga is an experience of non-duality, that I realized, oh my God, there's a word for this. There's a whole context that this came in. But basically, after 20 years, it took me 20 years, but I basically, I think, kind of bushwhacked my way there without really understanding what I was doing, because I just wanted to understand the nature of reality.
Just aware of being aware.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm being awakened to the multidimensional nature of human beings as such. Where do you think that will lead to with our humankind evolution?
There's a couple of aspects here. The first aspect is the idea of lucid dreamers interacting with the deceased in lucid dreams. Because all of us know that we only have a limited amount of time in this physical reality. I mean, most of us will be lucky to make it to 90 or 100 or something like that. And so what's curious about lucid dreaming is you can become consciously aware when you see a deceased person, and if you know what to do, you can actually see if you can verify the after-death state. So here's an example that happened to me. A few years after my dad died, I became aware one time when I saw a gold ladder, and down from it comes my father. And at that moment I became lucidly aware, because I thought, wait a second, Dad's been dead for 3 years now. Then I began to question, though, in that kind of Western rational mode. I thought, wait a second, is this my dad a spiritual being, or is this my dad a dream projection, a symbol, a representation? And so I thought, I'm going to work on this. So we greeted each other, and I looked at my dad in this lucid dream, and lucidly aware, I asked him, okay, Dad, you're from the land of the dead. When do you think Mom's going to die? And he looked at me and he said, oh, probably in 2 to 6 years. And I said, of what? And he replied, a heart condition, which really surprised me because she'd never had any heart problems. And so we went on and talked a little bit more. Then he told me to be quiet because he came to tell me things, and he told me a list of things. 23 months later, almost 2 years exactly later, my mom almost did die of a heart condition. And then a few years after that, she almost died again of a heart condition because she was taking Vioxx prescribed to her for some medical condition, and it was apparently affecting her heart. So what I'm trying to say here is, when you get verifiable evidence like that, because he said she would probably die in 2 to 6 years, when you get verifiable evidence like that, you can start to see that maybe lucid dreaming could be set up in scientific experiments to actually prove the nature of the after-death state by interacting with the deceased. And there's other ways you could set this up to get information to validate it. So that shows us just one layer of dimension, though. So we got waking reality, and we got the reality of the apparently deceased figures. But as you go deeper and have experience with out-of-bodies and other things, you realize that we really are multidimensional beings, that there's more to us than just this physical realm, and that we can go much deeper if we know how to use techniques like lucid dreaming to get there.
So you believe lucid dreaming will help us when we actually reach the death state ourselves?
That's actually the position of the Buddhists. They say that part of the reason to practice dream yoga and lucid dreaming is to know how to respond at the time of death. And because you know how a mental reality responds, having been in it in many lucid dreams, that you'll know what to do and how to approach things for your own better good, or possibly a better reincarnation experience in the next go-around.
That was my next question. I was going to say, having explored the depths of our consciousness, to continue without the physical body, what are your thoughts on the subject of reincarnation? Rebirth?
It's interesting. In the original version of my book that I sent my editor and publisher, I had an entire chapter on interacting with past life selves in the lucid dream state. Because this is something that I spent about 9 months doing in my lucid dreams. And I feel, once again, that not only do you get subjective evidence when you interact with a past life self, you realize, oh, I'm connected to this person by virtue of this personality trait, or by virtue of this particular interest in my life. But sometimes you can get objective information. You can learn about something that's so deep in an ancient culture that you literally have to find an expert to verify the existence of that. For example, I had an ancient Japanese guy appear in my dream. It's kind of a semi-lucid dream, actually. And he throws these black pebbles in front of me And he looks at him and he says, "Oh, your life is almost half over now, but I see no major health problems." And then he gave me this big grin, and I woke up. And so at that moment, I began to wonder, is there some sort of divination technique in Japan of throwing black pebbles? And I started asking people who had been to Japan, and they said, oh, they'd never heard of it, never heard of it, never heard of it, until I met a woman who was descended from a long line of Zen masters. And I asked her, have you ever heard of this? And she goes, oh yeah, ancient Shinto practice, only practiced now in small villages in northern Japan. She said, how did you learn about it? And I said, it happened in a dream. It happened in a dream. So this is the kind of verifiable evidence that I think you can get, that you're connected to other lives, and you begin to realize that not only you're an ego awareness, and not only do you have a larger awareness, but you're actually connected to these other awarenesses, these other egos, and you're probably all existing in an eternal now, a spacious present. So that's why I'm saying that lucid dreaming has incredible depth, and if you get good at it, you can begin to explore it like this.
On the same subject, you've come across, there's a lot of talk of spiritual guides and helpers within the dream state. Have you had much experience of those, and if so, what sort of things came about?
So I just want to say for my lucid dreaming that I've had about 1,000 lucid dreams or more over 30 years, and probably only 2 or 3 times have I ever met a dream figure who identified itself as a guide or a guardian. Because what concerns me a little bit about this is I become lucidly aware and there's an attractive woman and I decide, oh, she's my guardian, because she's really hot. And so that's what I don't want people to do. What I'd prefer people to do is realize that on occasion in certain lucid dreams you might meet a guide or a guardian. And the first time this happened, I was driving in a dream, but I realized I was in the mountains in New Mexico, and I thought, I don't live in New Mexico, and so I let go of the wheel because I knew it was a lucid dream. I flew out of the car, landed in a mountain stream, I was looking up at the night sky, and I decided that I wanted to fly up to the stars. But instead of doing that, I thought, I won't get all that energy, so I just yelled out, hey stars, pull me up. And at that moment, the strangest thing happened, Hayden. I felt something grab my left arm and start pulling me up. And we went higher and higher and higher into the night sky, just high, 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 high. And finally we got up to the top, and it was interesting. By then, I could see it was a woman. She made a dot in the darkness and drew a line down like that, a line like that, and a line like that to create a 3-dimensional space for us. And I asked her, I said, what are you doing? And she said to me, you asked for help, so I'm helping you. And basically she told me that she was always there in my dreams and lucid dreams to observe me, and she was there to help when I needed help. And so finally, after we had this long conversation, I asked her, well, how do I get back to a dream? And she goes, oh, to enter a dream, go here. And I stepped into that space, and boom, I was in a dream. So I do feel that you do have kind of a larger awareness that's kind of aware of what you're doing in the dream state. You can call it a guide or a guardian if you'd like, and that's all fine. But I think you as the lucid dreamer are the one who needs to learn, and always going to the teacher to ask them, hey, tell me more, answer everything. That's not a way of growing and learning. That's a way of just using the teacher's knowledge. So if it happens spontaneously in a lucid dream that you meet a guide or guardian, that's great. If you go all the time seeking it out, I think you're shortchanging the lucid dream experience and not really using your own wits and your own thoughts to see how deep you can go.
I was just going to say, of all the dreams you've had, you've obviously had many in your time. Is there any that stood out with some sort of special significance or have been really amazing in some way?
Oh gosh, boy! When I think of all the lucid dreams I've had and all the experiences, probably the one that totally blew my mind was the first time I experienced my feeling tone. because hearing this ah sound was phenomenal. Having it vibrate me out of existence was phenomenal. And then later, probably 10 or 15 years later, when I read this book by Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche, The Tibetan Yogas of Dream and Sleep, he says that in their tradition, in the Buddhist tradition, ah is associated with the lucid dream state. And so oftentimes for them, a practice they use to help them become lucidly aware is they imagine at the base of their throat a red petal, a red lotus petal. And in the middle of it, in white, is the symbol for ah, or sometimes people just use an A. But to them, the sound ah is actually helps collect your energies in the central channel and will help you become lucidly aware. But it really shocked me that my feeling tone
that just occurred, yeah.
is this high-pitched ah sound, and that more than anything made me realize that this larger awareness, this awareness behind the dream, and that's why I call my book Lucid Dreaming: Gateway to the Inner Self. This inner self has vast knowledge, has knowledge not only about you, but also about the nature of existence, the nature of reality, the nature of other concepts that are outside of your knowing.
Also, I mean, as we're drawing to a close, being a seasoned explorer of the dream world, I know everyone's going to be really interested in if you have a favourite technique for accessing the state.
I started again with looking at my hands each night. Tonight in my dreams I'll see my hands and realize I'm dreaming. Tonight in my dreams I'll see my hands and realize I'm dreaming. And for me that was a very good beginning technique, because oftentimes my hands would pop right up in front of my face. This past year I was at a talk, and a young man told me he had read my book, and he said he did that, and his hands popped in front of his face and started slapping him in the face to help him realize that he should be lucid. But other times people's hands pop out and now they have 6 fingers, or they have no fingers, or they're missing their thumb, and people become lucidly aware. But really for beginners, I like that as a very simple technique. Look at your hands, just softly tell yourself in a very calm, relaxing way, tonight in my dreams I'll see my hands and realize I'm dreaming. And if you do it for 5 or 6 minutes before you go to sleep, and when you wake up naturally in the middle of the night, wonder, hey, did I see my hands? Normally within 3 or 4 or 5 days or maybe a week, boom, your hands will appear, you'll be climbing a ladder, see your hands, you'll become lucidly aware and realize you're dreaming. And so it's such a simple technique. That's the one that I want to offer out to people to give it a go and see what happens.
Okay. And one last thing is, I'm sure the viewers would like to know, is there any one key piece of advice that you could give the aspiring lucid dreamers out there?
Yeah, the one piece of advice is this: like anything, you have to persist. You have to develop a love of dreaming, of regular dreams, of dream symbolism, and you have to persist. And as you go forward, you have to recognize your fears and work through them and let go of them. In all of my lucid dreams, if I sense emotion, if I sense there's a problem, I go to the problem to find out what's going on, because I know it's being shown to me for my own greater good. And so if you trust in the dreaming, the larger psyche, you'll really be rewarded. But you have to persist.
Robert, thank you for joining us today, and thank you for sharing your experience.
Oh, thanks, Hayden.
It's been wonderful.
It's been great to be here.
Any viewers out there who'd like to learn more from Robert, make sure you get yourself a copy of Lucid Dreaming: Gateway to the Inner Self, or you can find more info on Robert's website, dreaminglucid.com. Robert also conducts workshops and seminars internationally, so check in with him and find out what he's doing.